Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. I'm Tom Keene, along with Paul Sweeney. Join us each day for insight from the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app. We've ignored FX a little bit, and that's when you go to the force. Jane Foley joins from RaboBank in London, just wonderful on the synthesis of foreign exchange. Jane, there seems to be not an outlier call, but a belief of a few that the euro must weaken, which I believe means the dollar will be resilient or stronger. Is the dollar broken? Is it now on a vector that is weaker?
You know, I don't think the dollar is broken. Certainly, we've got to get through the next few months. We've got to get through how many interest rate cuts the Fed is going to do. We've got to get our heads around that. And of course, the US election, too, which will obviously have a big influence on the US dollar. But, you know, if you listened yesterday to Draghi's speech, now he, of course, had published this paper yesterday, which was commissioned by the European Commission to really address some of the structural issues that Europe was facing. And he was talking about the need for Europe to find new investment worth 800 billion euros every year to match really the growth prospects of both China and the US. If you look at a chart of productivity, for instance, over the last few years, you see US productivity so much higher than that of most of the other G10. So the US fundamentals in that respect, in terms of productivity, in terms of growth, are certainly still stronger than Europe. And you know, from that point of view, I would say one of the biggest surprises in the FX market this year is the fact that the euro has managed to, it's sort of vying with the dollar for position of second best performing G10 currency in the year to date, despite Germany's economic woes, despite the movement of the far right in European politics, and despite, you know, all of these budget issues, particularly that of France.
Jane, here in the U.S., it's a very political environment. It's a political year, election year. We've got a big debate tonight. How does the foreign exchange market discount kind of just politics here in the U.S.?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, foreign exchange, like other asset prices, can only move in a binary way. So it therefore tends to simplify, you know, politics down to, you know, is it a buy or is it a sell? And what it's done, and I think we saw this very much in June after that TV debate between Biden and Trump, very much, you know, the Trump trade, that people putting on bets that, oh, you know, it looks like Trump will win this election. And therefore, what are the sort of policies that we might have from Trump? But they're going to be a bit more fiscal stimulus. We are going to potentially have more tariffs. And that, of course, meant for the dollar, well, if we were going to have more stimulus, if we were going to have more tariffs, there's going to be more inflation, and therefore the prospects of less Fed easing than we would have otherwise. Now, of course, over the last 7 weeks or so, we've seen Harris, you know, really bring some fresh momentum into the Democratic bid. And that, I think, is why the FX market will be watching tonight. Will she be able to sustain or build on that momentum or not? And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if she does build on that momentum, whether or not some of these Trump trades begin to, you know, further fizzle out.
So, Jane, I'm looking at the pound sterling here, up about 5% over the last year or so here. Is that sustainable here for the sterling here? I mean, you've got a budget coming up. Talk to us about sterling.
Well, you know, sterling is the best performing G10 currency in the year to date, and it was the second best performing G10 currency last year.
I know. You hear our voice.
I do,
exactly.
but you know,
in honor of the Queen and the coronation of King Charles, Jane Foley on strong sterling.
The Irish Jane Foley. So, so it is, you know, it has performed well. But what I would say is that it's not really a strong currency, not if you look at long-term averages. And I think what we've got to remember is back in September 2022, cable was at this lowest rate ever, and that was on the back of the Liz Truss mini budget. And we also saw in September 2022, euro sterling really leap higher on the back of that budget. So what we're seeing, I think, since then is sterling slowly regaining its composure, slowly regaining its poise. It's not strong yet, but it is stronger. And I think that the mini budget will certainly be a hurdle as to whether or not investor sentiment can remain positive as it has done in the last few months.
So what is the bet? Forget about the speculation, the trying to make, two big figures on weak euro or that. What is your foreign exchange, not investment, it's always a speculation, but 90-day, 6-month trade, Jane Foley?
I still think the yen has got further to go. I mean, I think the Bank of Japan meeting on September the 19th isn't going to be about September the 19th. It's going to be, is October in play for a Bank of Japan interest rate hike? And certainly if October's not in play, well, yeah, I think December we're going to see another interest rate hike. So I think the yen can make an awful lot of ground. I think if we look back in 2 years' time, we'll still see the yen at these sorts of levels as being cheap. And the budget for the UK, I think, is going to be instrumental too, because are we going to look back in 2 years' time and think, yeah, you know what, sterling was so cheap 2 years ago? Or actually, is this budget going to make us recognize all of the problems that we still have in the UK economy? So
on strong yen, you can frame out 140, 150 down to whatever. I get that. Where's a 130 sterling? Can you frame out 140, 150 sterling, the ascension of the United Kingdom, an Irish experiment?
Well, I think for sterling to get back to 140, we would have to see more better news on growth. Now, this year we've had, better than expected. We're doing okay in terms of the UK economy and in terms of growth, but there's an awful lot of headwinds, particularly in terms of the debt. Starmer, the Prime Minister, wants to see debt at 2.5%. Now, that would be exceptionally strong given the UK's recent record. So no one's really anticipating that. But if he can get, closer to 2%, I think sterling could see that. But there's a lot of ifs and buts in order to get from A to B. And I think we would need some more positive relationships with Europe, which Starmer does want to create. We'd have to see investment coming back into UK stocks. We'd have to see, the government tax policy, which is what the budget course is going to be all about. Not throwing investors' attitudes away. How much more is there going to be on capital gains tax, for instance? So there's a lot to play for right now. And at least the new government does understand that. But in certain respects, the Chancellor's got her hands tied behind her back because the fiscal situation in the UK is looking really quite poor.
Fascinating. Jane Foley, thank you so much. Always informative. With RaboBank there. This is a joy. There is no one from sea to shining sea in academics who's actually done it. Jennifer Lawless joins from UVA, out of Union. The way you get into Union College is you spell Schenectady. Oh, boy. Boom, you're in. Professor Lawless, thank you so much for joining us. What separates you from every other academic out there? Because you actually ran for a congressional district. You lost. But what's the difference in Jennifer Lawless versus all the other blathering academics?
Well, I wouldn't say most of them are blathering, some for sure. But I did run for Congress in 2006. So I think I have a little bit of a different kind of understanding of what actually goes into campaigns and elections. You
are one of 3 or 4 people, seriously, who can answer the question I get all the time. Why is America still not voted for a female president? Just synthesize that across your work at Stanford, at UVA.
The real answer is that there just haven't been enough female candidates to do it. So first of all, it is important to remember that Hillary Clinton received more popular votes than Donald Trump did. So it's not that Americans aren't willing to vote for a woman. Now, obviously, we elect our president through the Electoral College, so winning the popular vote didn't matter, but public opinion was on her side. But that's really been the only opportunity that the American people have had until heading into Election Day this year to cast a ballot for a female president. When it comes to Congress, when it comes to state legislatures, gubernatorial elections, women do just as well as men. The key is that they need to run in the first place.
Professor, how important is tonight for both of these candidates?
It's important. I don't think it's deal-breaking important the way that the June 27th debate was for Trump or Biden, but it's probably their only debate. It's the first time that they'll meet each other and that the American people will see them meet each other. And it's their opportunity not only to define themselves, but try to define their opponents to both voters and the global stage.
So I guess one of the issues here for Vice President Harris is to try to introduce herself a little bit and her policies and her outlook to the American public. How would you coach her about how to approach this evening?
I think the most important thing she needs to do is to decide which policies she wants to embrace from the Biden administration, and those will likely be the ones that have been working, and which that she'd like to distance herself from a little, and those will be the ones that still need a degree of help. So I can imagine her embracing her record on reproductive rights, what the Biden administration has tried to do in a post-Dobbs world. I can also imagine her putting forward some new ideas when it comes to inflation, when it comes to prices, when it comes to the border, because people are not satisfied with the way that the Biden administration has handled those issues. So it's a tough needle to thread because she wants to achieve success and distance herself at the same time.
Is this the moment, and I guess former President Trump moving to the middle maybe isn't going to happen just based off everything he said over the last 90 days. But is this where she moves to the middle, where she signals, I'm like Reagan, I got to get nominated by being a conservative, but now, like Clinton, frankly, I move to the middle? Is this evening where it happens?
I'm not sure that she's going to move to the middle because she's already been perceived as flip-flopping on a lot of issues. So I think what she needs to do is demonstrate that she has a set of policy proposals that will work for people in the middle, even though she ultimately is a Democratic liberal.
But Professor, does policy proposals get you elected?
They don't, but not having them can cost you an election. So the nuances of her border policy are not going to be what wins the election, but for every single day that the Republicans and the Trump campaign can bash her for not having a clear border policy could hurt. So it's difficult. People don't vote on policy nuance, but they're turned off when there seems to be a lack of detail.
So on the other side of the aisle, Professor, former President Trump, any guidance you would provide that campaign for this evening?
You know, this is going to be about discipline versus policy. Kamala Harris has to demonstrate that she has policy chops, which is a little bit ironic given that she's been the vice president. And Donald Trump needs to demonstrate that he can make it through 90 minutes without coming undone. Those are not comparable bars, but they might be equally difficult to achieve for both candidates.
Right. David Gurman was just with us. He'll join us, folks, here in 35 minutes. Professor Lawless, David Gurman talked about the sterility of the debate versus others where there's an audience. Does the sterility benefit either of these candidates?
Donald Trump plays to an audience, so it's not his ideal situation. But Kamala Harris likes to prosecute. And so even though the sterility of the debate might not hurt her, the muted mics might. So she's not going to be able to fact check him in real time. She's not going to be able to ask direct questions the same way that he's not going to be able to get energy from an audience.
Professor, thank you so much. Really appreciate this. Let's do this again. Jennifer Lawless, UVA, just truly excellent on the female effort across America in politics. Her major theme is the ambition of more women getting into the process and doing more and such. Lucky to get him on because he's interviewing to be defensive coach at University of Michigan football after what happened with Texas the other day. Mark Gurman joins us. Mark Gurman, definitive on Apple. Mark, tell me the relationship of the frenzy I see from T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T to sell 1,000, 1,200, 1,400 iPhones. Is that why Tim Cook's smiling? Because he knows the wireless companies are going to sell these things regardless?
Wireless companies indeed are going to sell these things regardless, Tom. I mean, despite the fact that these are iterative updates, you have one pent-up demand from prior years, people who didn't upgrade, and the Apple brand is really, truly as strong as ever, right? So despite the fact you're not seeing a lot of changes here, people are going to buy these new phones anyways. People are excited about them. People like the new colors. People like the new camera features. So, for Apple, despite them doing very little, it's always an exciting time in every September.
You're not doing buy, hold, sell, but what's your vector on the so-called service business? Paul, this is where if you have umpteen children, these $2, $4, $12 things hit your checking account. Mark, do services take off with these new toys?
I think services continues to expand, right? I mean, the services business is interesting because at some point you're going to see Apple move to a more AI-infused search engine. At some point, this Google deal that generates about 18 to 22 billion a year from them is going to fall off a cliff because regulators are seriously investigating it. So that's hanging in the balance right now. You're going to see a little dip probably. But at some point, when they switch to an AI-based search engine, deeper integration with ChatGPT to replace Google, a new deal with Google Gemini to replace Google Search, Gemini being Google's AI service, you're probably going to see things rebound, right? And so I am optimistic long-term about the company's services business. The one thing I will say, though, is when was the last time you downloaded an app, right? So the app paradigm where people download apps and Apple takes a commission from there, that's sort of dwindling. The industry has moved to more of a services and subscription model, right, where people are paying monthly for these things, and that makes this especially more lucrative for the company. They're not making money off of app downloads anymore. They're making money off people subscribing to in-app purchases.
Interesting. So, Mark, the other piece of major news for Apple today and Google, Apple loses EU top court case over 13 billion euros in terms of a tax bill. How important is this to the company, or is it just one more of these regulatory headwinds that this company faces?
Apple is a very PR and marketing driven company, right? And so for them, this is something that is not great news, but they're going to do everything they can to sort of sweep it under the rug. And so here's what they're going to do. This is not going to impact, the Apple revenue number you're going to see them announce at the end of October when they talk about Q4 earnings, right? They're going to position this as an extra tax bill, right? So on the balance sheet, their effective tax rate is going to go up significantly because of that $10 billion charge. It's not like they're making a new cash payment that's coming out of their revenue. It's not like their operating expenses are going up. This is tax, right? This is how they're going to position it. And this is money that's been in an escrow account between Apple and Europe for several years now. And so they're going to downplay this as much as they can. And to answer your question, this is just another regulatory hurdle. And, companies do face regulatory hurdles from time to time, right? But Apple and some of these other companies, they've been facing a lot lately, and they're probably going to face more.
Mark Gurman with us, folks, and for you worldwide, when you see according to Bloomberg, I mean, nobody, Paul, it is property, output, journalistic output is stolen at Bloomberg or worldwide in tech like Mark Gurman. Mark Gurman, when you look, and it's Tim Cook with the rainbow, and they're inside that fancy building I assume you've been in a bunch of times. When you look at that, what's your longevity, your shelf life of Tim Cook?
Yeah, the Tim Cook succession story is one I've been following extremely closely. In fact, following Tim Cook's succession and the succession of Apple's management team is top 3 in my priority list, and it has been for the last year or so. Tim Cook is, pushing 64. The rest of the Apple executive team, they're in their early to mid 60s. And so you're going to see this massive changeover of Apple management over the next several years. And you're seeing this starting later this year with the CFO, Luca Maestri. He's stepping down to CFO at the tail end of this year, and he's going to move to more of an advisory role in charge of things that are like information systems, real estate. So a much more minute role compared to what he was doing before. And you're going to see other Apple executives move into these smaller roles over time as well. Tim Cook, it could go anywhere. I mean, I've heard people speculate that he's going to leave in the next 2 to 3 years. I've heard
Right.
people believe that he's going to stay until he's 70 plus and pull a Bob Iger, right? But technology obviously is a younger person's game. They have an heir apparent there. His name is Jon Ferro. He's the senior VP of hardware engineering. Truth be told, there's really no alternative to him, to anyone else but him being the new CEO down the road. So I think that plan's in place, but it's going to be a scary time when Apple begins that real changeover.
Mark, nobody cares. All they want to know is Mark Gurman going to buy the new iWatch? You're out on Twitter. You had to do a Gurman correction on the iWatch. Which watch are you going to buy from Apple so you can be cool in all those secret meetings you're in?
Well, I was originally thinking about the Apple Watch Series 10. I liked the one with the Link bracelet. And then I thought about it. What's the difference between the Series 10 and the Watch Ultra that I'm wearing right now? It's really battery life. It's double the battery life on the Ultra versus the Series 10 model. And if you want to wear this thing to sleep, if you want to use the sleep apnea detection, if you want to do the sleep tracking, it's kind of difficult to use an Apple Watch that's basically going to run out of battery after the end of the day. Before you go to bed, the watch is going to be gone anyways, right? And so you really kind of need a 2-day battery life. So for me, the Apple Watch Ultra, first of all, the new black color looks incredible. Even though there's nothing different, I will be moving from the silver one to the black model. The other component here is that battery that I mentioned, and the screen on the Ultra is a third brighter than the screen on the Series 10, so you're getting a bit of better brightness there too.
Look at that.
And next year, I expect a bigger revamp to the Ultra.
See, it's like Mr. Consumer Guy.
I know.
Paul's taking notes here.
I am,
because
absolutely.
Are you going to buy 3 or 4 of these things? Mark Gurman.
Oh, that's funny.
Way too early in your morning. Thank you so much. And I suggest the interview in Ann Arbor. You can do both. You can be defensive coach of the 0-1 or 1-1 Michigan, and also continue world-class coverage of Apple. You, Jay, look at the front pages of Lisa Mateo Hour. Lisa, you're all fired up over there.
I am fired up. You remember we talked about the Wall Street Journal's list of overall college rankings, right? The best colleges for your kids.
Urian Timmer, Babson yesterday.
Babson, yes, that was in the list too. Now this is looking at the best salaries list. So the Wall Street Journal has the colleges that are making graduates the most money. At the top, Ivy League colleges, those with strong tech programs. Number 1,
Shocked.
MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Early career earnings had a median of just over $133,000. Now, it also had a lot of success stories from alumni.
Whoa. Did you say starting pay?
Starting, yes.
It's a 133?
133.
22.5 I made in 1986.
Really? My first job, $18K.
You were living
Newspapers,
large.
yes.
Yeah.
Woo!
I remember looking at it going, they take that much in taxes?
Exactly. What's FICA? That's what my first question.
Number 2, Stanford University.
Okay.
They said that entrepreneurship pipeline, of course, into the tech companies. Princeton University, number 3. Private universities, though, 36 of the top 50 spots on that salary list. All right. But STEM programs, Georgia Tech was 4th, so STEM programs
Those guys
also.
are
Yeah, but
serious engineers.
To me, there's a divide between kids going to college, whether they're taking art history or electrical engineering, if they're working their tail off, or are they just sliding through? What percentage is just sliding through?
I'm probably in the sliding through category. That's why.
You know, I just.
Especially at business school.
Chuck Lieberman was in yesterday. Chuck Lieberman, good morning. Iconic equity investor. He's got that MIT ring on his finger.
Yeah.
With the bear.
Playing around with those people.
No, it's a beaver. Excuse me. The beaver.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, it's a classic. It's like Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Jess Menton's got the Texas A&M ring on it. Aggie ring. It's a hunk of gold. Next.
Well, keep it with education. So the Boston Globe had this interesting article. A lot of parents, more parents in the 3 of Boston's largest suburbs, they're sending their kids to private schools. So they're switching them from public to private. We're talking about Brookline, Cambridge, Newton. They have about 30,000 school-age children. So 1 in 5 now attend private or parochial schools. The reason why experts are saying COVID had a lot to do with it, in September 2020, a lot of private schools brought the students back full-time, but the public schools stayed online.
Interesting.
And a lot of parents want that more challenging environment for the kids. They say that the private school does that for them. They have the smaller class sizes as well.
To me, it's nationwide.
So it is nationwide.
The articles
yes,
in the
they
Globe,
They do get to that. Yes.
Up in New England, they have so many good private schools up in New England, as they do around here in the greater
Sure.
New York area. But
Yeah, I just think COVID. We don't
COVID was
understand.
huge for that.
We don't understand with our kids. I mean, we're living this every day. I mean, the vet bill hasn't recovered from COVID, but I'm sorry, we don't understand what COVID did to the kids' learning cycles. Just that they're behind. Period.
Yep.
That's all there is
They
to
are.
it.
And then public schools have budget cuts, strikes. I mean, there's so many different issues for the public
In
schools
New York
to,
as well.
to deal with. Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah. Next, what do you got?
Okay, NFL season, right? You've been talking
There we
about
go.
it. Underway, okay? But experts are seeing more bankruptcies in states that have legalized sports betting.
so personal bankruptcies.
Yes, consumer bankruptcy attorneys. They're
Okay.
telling Bloomberg, they're starting to see gambling debts more often. It's happening in the states with the sports betting apps. Here's what the studies show. Residents in those states shown early signs of financial distress, a 28% increase the likelihood of bankruptcy filings. It could get worse because Americans expected to report a record $35 billion in legal bets through the NFL season, up from $27 billion last year. So you see the difference. A lot of them men in their 20s and 30s.
Yep.
That's who's placing the
Okay.
bets. But yeah, there.
Can I ask a dumb question? And the guy at Bloomberg Intelligence is expert on this in gambling.
Brian Egger. Yep.
Does anybody win
The house.
in the long run? I mean, like,
House wins.
you-
That's why they build these huge casino hotels and swimming pools and.
but like over 3 weeks of NFL, is there somebody that wins over 3 weeks? Forget about the season.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just to give, and they go, oh my, OMG, I made a lot of money.
bet
don't
with your
know.
head,
I don't-
not over it.
Yeah.
That's what they say. But I guess some people.
I don't have that kind of but they're blowing through their 401ks by
I'm
gambling.
still
So
not used to
it's
this.
crazy.
I'm back with Pete Rose, and I'm not. I mean, we're
It's
full
so
gambling.
easy with your phone, though. I mean,
That's the
you
problem.
can do intro
Yes, they're
game
saying
bets,
it's made
just,
it easier.
I mean,
more accessible. Right, it's right there.
and it's just We'll see. But it's and I don't have that 28 states or something like that has legalized gambling.
30, yeah.
30,
Yeah,
something like
about
that.
30 states.
Is that it, or you got one more?
No, one more.
Yes.
This one's a dinger. Okay. Halloween, right? Just
Nope.
over a month away.
Nope.
Walmart has a costume for adults that cater to, let's say, open relationships. So it's a
Nice.
costume of 3. It comes in a
Thruples.
set of 3. Thruples.
Yes, that's a
what
term. I
they're
learned that.
calling it. I never heard that word before today. So Walmart calls it. It's a couple's 3-piece s'mores costume. Okay.
S'mores bar.
S'mores.
Okay,
So you have
s'mores
one
thing.
who's a
Okay.
piece of chocolate, one who's the marshmallow, and one who's the graham cracker. Okay, it sells for about $27. But the New York Post says it's gaining popularity. Social media.
Sure.
The throuple costume. More people are to that open relationship.
Nice. All right.
Calling it that.
Rich, is this a family network?
I called it open. There's other names for it. But studies show Gen Zers, that's what they're more kind of open to.
Good for them.
This costume becoming more popular. Yes.
Have fun with that.
So this Halloween, have fun.
It used to be simple. Are you going as Elsa or the other
No.
girl? Let it go, let it go. It used to be, Halloween's for kids.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. Adults are getting
do it.
huge
Yeah,
parties,
they have the adult Halloween parties.
I remember when it switched.
That's
You ready?
When?
Coors Beer. The Elvira campaign, to me, shifted the country. It was so successful. And that's when the bars all picked up on it big time and all that.
Big Halloween.
Yes.
But to me, it was for kids and all that. We'll have to see. Right, agree. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa Mateo on the newspapers. This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, bringing you the best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. You can also watch the show live on YouTube. Visit the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube to see the show weekday mornings from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern from our global headquarters in New York City. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen, and always on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Terminal, and the Bloomberg Business app.